Welcome to Moments with Marianne. Allow me to interrupt your train of thought with something that may be one of the most interesting things you hear today. This is Marianne-pestana, and our special guest today is Reverend Paul-John-Roach, and he's here to share with us his new book, Unity and the World Religions. So Paul's a UK native and a graduate of Jesus College, Oxford University. He has a BA and MA degrees in English and holds a postgraduate degree in education from the University of Wales. Paul was ordained at the Unity School in Kansas City, Missouri in 1988 and has served the Unity movement on several boards and teams, including the Board of Unity World Headquarters. So let's welcome to the show, Reverend Paul-John-Roach.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here, Marianne.
Yeah, what a great honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. I have to ask, what inspired you to write this?
Well, I was working on my first book, originally what was going to be my first book, which is my journey to India in my 20s, kind of a travelogue, historical account, spiritual journey. And then somebody at Unity approached me with the idea of writing a book about world religions from the Unity or unitive perspective. And so I put my first book on hold and wrote this one. And of course, you know, being a minister for 30 years and always interested in world religions, I had a lot of notes and a lot of ideas. So I put all those together. It took me about 5 months to write it and another year, of course, to edit and, you know, get it published. And so, yeah, that was the origin of it. But, I've always been fascinated by the connections between the different religions of the world, you know, not trying to make them all one, but enjoying the diversity, but noting the essential unity within all religions, especially, you know, the mystical core of religions. And that fascinates me. So this is an overview and exploration of that from my own personal perspective.
Well, I found it to be so fascinating, and you did so much great research for this. I was just blown away by the research, you know. And so when I'm thinking about, like, you start off with your story about, you know, your first conscious connection to anything. And I'd love for you to share that with our listeners, because I think sometimes they think you have to have an angel come down and, you know, tap you on the shoulder or something, you know?
Yeah, you know, the divine speaks to us in a variety of ways, right? And everybody's different. But for me, I think, you know, Mother Nature was very much the way that I felt the sense of the divine. And I was lucky enough to grow up on a golf course in Wales, in Great Britain, and spent the first, 5 to 7 years of my life there. And so this was close to nature. You know, there were woods and streams and beautiful landscape, and the sea was nearby. So I was really imbued with the wonders of nature, and I still am. You know, I still call myself a nature mystic because we are part of nature. You know, we tend to think we're cut off now. We live in a built environment. We're separate from Mother Nature, but we are actually, you know, integrated and part of Mother Nature. And if we forget that, it's at our peril, right? Because we belong, we arise from the earth, and yes, we touch the stars, but we are connected to the earth as well. So we are part and parcel of the created order, and hence we're creative, right? Because we have the same creativity that's in Mother Nature is in us, right? And that's what impels us. So it's always been a beautiful solace to me to go into nature. You know, if I ever feel rattled and upset, and there's a number of reasons why we can be upset these days, right? It's good for me to spend time just looking at trees, enjoying nature, going for a walk, whatever it is. I'm very blessed to look out onto a beautiful forest where I live in Fort Worth. But wherever we are, you know, I think get out into nature, smell, breathe, connect yourself, take your shoes off, walk around and feel the earth. It's healing. It's transformative.
As you often hear of people, how they regenerate their spirit in many ways by connecting to the earth. And so what I really appreciate is that you really dive into in your personal story about this connection, this really deep connection you had and still have with, nature. And I think a lot of people can really resonate with that.
I think so, because it's ever present. Even if we live in the city, there's usually trees, there's usually some garden spaces, there's certainly the sky. There's still a connection to nature, and we know only too well how closely connected we are when we get bad weather, right? Then we realize that Mother Nature is all around us in gentle and in fierce forms. One of my first spiritual experiences, mystical experiences, is when I was on the mountain near our home in Wales with my dad. I was age 7, and my sister had just died. She just made it to 5 years old and passed away. And I think both of us were feeling sad. It was in the fall, and we were climbing up this mountain through forests. And my father was feeding me hazelnuts. He'd crack the nuts with his teeth and open the shell and feed me the nuts. And there was something tender about that, I guess, that transported me. And I disappeared for a while. I literally went into what I now call the white light. There was nothing. The forest disappeared. My dad disappeared. I disappeared. It was all just one white. And I don't know how long it lasted. Like many mystical experiences, it may have just been a second or so, but it seemed to be eternal. And when I came back, of course, I was surprised. And I didn't tell my dad what had happened. I don't think he ever realized. But that was my first entry into something beyond three-dimensional reality. It was confirmation for me that there's more going on than meets the eye, right? That we're not just physical beings. There's a spiritual component to our lives. And I'm sure it was precipitated by the loss of my sister. And, I was probably open to receiving something like that. And it was a sense of rightness, a sense of order that came in that experience that's lasted me all my life. It's, it's touching the hem of the garment of the divine in that moment. It's a pretty remarkable experience for me.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about your sister. And I hear what you're saying about your experience. It sounds like it was just such an amazing thing to have happen. What initially drew you to Unity? How did that even get on your radar? How did you even know about it?
Yeah, I went to India when I was in my 20s and started my spiritual path in earnest. And I'd always loved Jesus, but I wasn't that happy about the religion that was made about Jesus. And so I was very influenced by Eastern religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism. But when we came back from India, my girlfriend came back with me, who I met in India, and she was from America. And we went to a festival of mind, body, and spirit, it was called, in London. And there was a booth, a very lively booth of Indian dancing and singing, meditating. A lot of people in robes and orange clothes. And I was attracted to that because I've seen a lot of that in India. But then right next door was a very quiet little booth, just white, with some tables and some books and a little lady sitting there. And that was the Unity booth. And there was a book there that said, "Discover the Power Within You," which is one of the great books of Unity, written by Unity minister Eric Butterworth. And it just hit me, discover the power within you. That was it. That was my understanding of what Jesus was teaching, because he said the kingdom of heaven is within you. And so I started studying Unity and found out that it was okay to be, based in Jesus, but also open to all other religions. And that was a wake up for me, that I could combine the two. And so Unity has been a wonderful movement for me, because it allows me to be the Hindu Buddhist that I am, but also the lover of Jesus and his teachings, and combines them all together in this mystical but practical teaching, which I love. So it's very interesting, that we left the loud, noisy booth next door and went to this quiet one, and it led to some remarkable things.
Do you think the reason that people really gravitate towards unity is that they kind of get in this position where they don't really feel like they are connecting with the church they were born into? How did they get to this place where they're feeling like, hey, I belong?
Well, you're right. I think a lot of people who come into unity have been burned in some way, by the religion of their childhood, their particular tradition, because they found it to be a little too judgmental in some ways, or not all inclusive or welcoming, to all people, or certainly not to other religions. And so unity offers that welcome. A lot of people who come into unity said, I think I've come home. I think that's because, the teachings of unity are not creedal. There's no dogma as such. There's principles to live by. And I think we yearn for that. We yearn for some kind of order, but we don't want to be told how to do it. We want to think for ourselves. And of course, unity is based in mind and consciousness transformation. It's part of the New Thought movement. Change your mind, change your life. And that's powerful for people, because it's not some priest or someone else or some rules that are telling me what to do. It's my own consciousness, and I can take charge of that consciousness and move from things that are no longer serving me to something that's much more magnificent. But just changing my mind about something. And we see that in Buddhism, and we see that in all other religions, this idea that there's a power in changing your consciousness and moving towards what we might call Christ consciousness or Buddha awareness, whatever. I think names are not important, right? It's the feeling of allowing these energies to move in and through our being, through our mind, through our bodies, and in every part of us. So I think unity does a good job of that. But we find that we can use techniques from Buddha and the Buddhist teachings. We can use techniques from the Tao, Judaism. There's wisdom in all religions, and we can combine them in our own personal path, whichever one appeals to us. There's a smorgasbord. I've got a chapter called Smorgasbord. There's a smorgasbord of ways of approach, and not everyone's right for us, but some are. So explore, find out what works for you, and incorporate it into your path.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have that personal connection, and that's something that I really appreciate about unity teaching. And as for our listeners that are new to what some of the teachings are, can you share that with us?
Yeah, the book talks about the 5 key universal principles of truth that we call the 5 truth principles in unity, but they're not just unity principles. They're in all religions. And the first one is the fact that God is the one presence and one power. There's no 2 energies in the universe. So there is no devil. There may be evil in the hearts of man, but the fact is that there is a twisted sense of the good that creates evil. It's not a power in and of itself. And really, we take that idea from the idea that if God's all powerful, all seeing, all knowing, then there cannot be an opposing force. So the one presence. So that's why the unity is named unity. That is one. That's the first principle. The second principle really flows from that, and that is if everything is one, then we are part of that. We are one with the one. And so we have the spark of divinity. We have a spark of that wholeness and oneness within us. We call it the Christ or the Buddha, nature, whatever. But it's the fact that we are inherently good, not inherently bad. The third principle, again, is shared by all the world's religions. That is the formative power of mind. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. What goes around comes around, right? It's the universal principle of the universal law of how things unfold. And the fourth principle is prayer and meditation, ways to connect to God most effectively. And then finally, the fifth one is action, because the 4 principles before are wonderful, but unless we're able to put them into practice in our lives, Jesus said, by their fruits shall you know them, right? That's what we aim to be, practitioners, expressors of the truths that we know. And so we have to act wisely with love, helpfully in our world compassionately. So that's crucially important. But if you take those principles and look at other world religions, which I've done in the book, I find extreme amounts of commonality. There may be different terms for it, but it's essentially the same. And that's a joy. We're celebrating the humankind's diversity, but also its common identity, where we come in alignment with these great principles.
Yeah, it seems that we have, in some ways, more in common than not. I liked how you brought that ribbon kind of through on some of the main key points.
Yeah, I call it the golden thread, or the perennial philosophy, which is a term that Aldous Huxley used in his wonderful book. I think it was originally written in 1944, The Perennial Philosophy, and it was chock full of quotes from various religions on different themes. And that was a pretty seminal book for me. Wonderful book. And I just like that idea that this philosophy keeps popping up. It doesn't matter where or how, because it's based ultimately in love. It's based in connectedness, and it cannot be extinguished, right? It prevails. And we see it in all the great texts of this world, the Bhagavad Gita, the Jesus' teachings, the Buddhist texts, the Tao Te Ching. We see it in Native American spirituality and in African teachings. It's within everything.
Yeah, I had great appreciation for how you put this all together. And you start off with Christianity and unity.
Right.
Why did you start there?
Well, because unity is often considered to be Christian or based in Christianity. We take Jesus as our way show, our elder brother. And so it seemed natural to put Christianity first. I wanted to deal with that. I don't want to shy away from the fact that some people say, well, unity isn't really Christian. Well, they say it's not Christian because we don't necessarily subscribe to a literalist view of what Christianity is. We're more spiritual or metaphysical. And I talk about in that chapter, I talk about the two great threads in church history, the thread that seemed to come out of Alexandria in Egypt, which was way more symbolic, metaphysical, universalist, and then the thread that came out of the Church of Antioch in modern day Syria, which is a little more literalist, dualistic, and you see these threads all through Christianity. There's always the mystical universalist path, and then there's also the more traditional dualistic path. Unity is subscribed to the Alexandrian universalist path, as do all the great Catholic mystics and the transcendentalists, and there's a long list of this golden thread weaving. But the other side tends to be more into control, I would say, having systems of belief that you have to adhere to, and seems to be prevalent right now. And sometimes that side of things, that literalist side, can get a little bit fundamental. And then we got a problem, I think, because then we got people telling people how to believe, how to vote, and all this stuff, and we see it in Christianity. We certainly see fundamentalism in Islam. We see it now in Hinduism, unfortunately, in India with the present government there. So it's always unfortunately rearing its head, that fundamentalist approach. Now, the good news about fundamentalism, it means we're trying to get back to basics, to the fundamental truths. But sometimes we're trying to get back to the fundamental truths that give me the right to tell you how to think. And that's not what we do in unity. Nobody's telling anybody how to think in unity. And I think that's refreshing. We need a path that trusts our own inner guidance and doesn't rely on people telling me how to think or believe.
I don't know about you, but a few people I know, including myself, have been to different services where the preacher or the person there is saying something, it doesn't quite resonate. And you're just like, ooh, not sure I could do that, or that's really resonating with me. But it's interesting because unity allows you to be where you are.
Absolutely. And, we certainly don't judge or condemn people that don't think like us. They're on a spiritual path. And if it works for them, so be it, right? But I think unity believes in the supremacy of love. And sometimes I think there's certain traditions, movements, whatever, denominations that emphasize the supremacy of judgment. And we're all going to be judged by an angry God. And we don't subscribe to that because we feel that God ultimately is love. It's not judging us. We hear the phrase original sin, right? And we're sinners from the beginning, because of Adam and Eve and the fall and everything. And that's one interpretation. But original sin didn't even enter into Christianity until the 4th or 5th centuries, when St. Augustine came up with that doctrine. And I love what Matthew Fox, the great Catholic mystic and theologian, talks about original blessing rather than original sin, that we are inherently blessed. I think Judaism understands this too, that the fall of man isn't as emphasized in Judaism. It's more the fact that we came into knowledge, because we ate of the tree of good and evil. We began to understand dualities, polarities in the world. And that's a gift, but it also leads us astray, right? So it's a fall forward, as Eric Butterworth put it, rather than a fall backward. We fell into knowledge. Well, when you have knowledge, you can go to the good and the bad in that knowledge, and that's a gift, but it's also a curse. So we see this played out, in our world. We see people making choices and judgments based on domination and judgment of others, other nations, other belief systems. That's not the higher way. I don't think the higher way is love, and love prevails. I'm going to affirm that. No matter what's going on, ultimately the truth will prevail, because that is the true power in the world, in the universe.
You share a lot of different religions in your book, and you just break them down. I was really intrigued by unity and Hinduism, and I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
Yeah, Hinduism is a huge, huge religion. It's very eclectic. Number one, it tends to welcome all aspects within this thing called Hinduism, or the eternal truth, as it's often called in India. And Jesus is considered a great prophet in India, even though he certainly wasn't a Hindu, right? But remember being in southern India one time, and there was an electrical transformer on the street, and it was painted just like many things are painted in India. It's a wonderful place full of art and creativity. And on one side of the front of this transformer was a picture of Jesus, and on the other side, next to him, holding hands, was an image of Shiva, the great god of transformation. And underneath it says, Jesus and Shiva are brothers. And I love that, because it's acknowledging that all, once again, essentially one, right? But Hinduism is like India. Hinduism is vast and complicated, and has a path for everybody, from deep devotion to atheism. There's paths of atheism in Hinduism. There's wonderful scriptures, very profound scriptures like the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, many others. And then there's people like the Naga Babas, that go around naked, covering themselves in ash, eating feces and dirt and whatnot, and smoking cannabis, and hanging out in graveyards, and all, doing everything that they're not supposed to do in terms of what the Brahmin priests would have you do. But they're showing that, even in those areas, there's God, there's the divine. So, if you want to find the variety of life, go to India, because you have the very rich, wealthy people, and then you have the Naga Babas, and then you have the mendicants, and then you have the householders who are dedicated to living the spiritual life. There's everything in India in that regard. It's quite a remarkable place for religious study, and endlessly fascinating for me anyway. I've been to India many times, and never fails to transform my life. Let's put it like that.
I think that's a good way to put it. When we look at just not only the work that you've done, but also this amazing book, and it has me thinking. I mean, you've included so much research on this book. Was there anything that surprised you when you were doing your research?
Since I've been a minister, I've been studying these topics for these religions for years. So, I've had plenty of time to take them in and understand them. So there's no real surprises in the sense that I'd come across most of them before that I wrote the book. So, but when you write a book, you're always fascinated with how it turns out, because you start writing, you're not sure where you're going with it. You're trying to incorporate it in a way that's user friendly, right? And I think that's what I tried to do in this book. So somebody wrote me a review and said. And I thought it was very, very nice. He said, it's like having a conversation with a very intelligent friend. Well, it's nice to feel like you're highly intelligent. But the point being is that it's a conversation. And I think the book is aimed to be that, a conversation. And I had that in mind as I was writing the book, that I had a person in mind that in front of me, and I'm talking to them, basically. I'm just writing it down. And I think that's helpful. It comes across that way. But to get back to my original point, when you're writing a book, you're not sure where it's going, because your mind is creative. And so that surprised me sometimes. I had ideas about a religion that I never thought of before until I started writing. I think that's the power of writing something down. And it's a power that you can apply in your life today. If you've got a problem or a challenge or some opportunity, write it down. Write down your feelings about it. Write the positives and the negatives around that opportunity, and things will come forward you'd never imagined before, you'd never thought of before. And that's the power of the creative mind, active through actually committing it to writing. So I think that happened to me a number of times. And I thought, I see the connection now in this one aspect of Islam, so I didn't see before. I see how that works in Hinduism, and so that was nice to see that that unfold as you write.
Yeah, or even the concept of karma with Buddhism. I could see the string of that, and I was like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, Buddhism is extremely profound spiritual psychology. Probably the most profound system ever committed by any religion, right? And so there is so much depth to that. I mean, modern psychotherapy in the West is sort of beginning to approach some of the subtleties that were already thought of and developed by over millennia, actually, in Buddhist teaching. So it's a highly subtle and profound spiritual psychology. I think they're the best that we've come up with so far. Not that other religions don't have, this deep psychological insights, but Buddhism has been able to systematize it in a very beautiful way.
Yeah, I really appreciate their meditation practice, because I think, I know in your book you talk about prayer and how that just heightens the connection we have with the God mind. And I'd love for you to expand on that.
Well, prayer, of all the principles in the world's religions, prayer is the most universal of all of them. We may say one presence and one power, there's only one God, but some denominations will think, yeah, there is God, but there's also the devil. In terms of our divinity, some people say, well, we're not truly divine. We're divine by adoption, but we're etc. But when it comes to prayer, there's many kinds of prayer, but we all agree on the fact that prayer is a wonderful way to connect to the divine, I think. So whether you call it prayer or meditation, these are aspects of the same divine connection. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, said that prayer was the most highly accelerated mind action known to man. And I like that. Most highly accelerated mind action. It's powerful. We're connecting to the incredible energies within us and within the universe when we're in prayer. Case in point, somebody, I put up a prayer on Facebook a week or so ago, and somebody said, yeah, it's all nice to pray, but, we need to act. Nothing comes from prayer. I think I was praying in terms of Ukraine. And I just wrote back, I said, no, prayer is powerful here. Let's not dismiss prayer. Yes, we have to act. But with prayer, you're connecting energy to energy around the world. And I've seen many transformations because of the positive power of prayer. And it's not a sort of begging prayer, right? In Unity, we talk about affirmative prayer, aligning our energy with the energy of the universe and cooperating with that energy, not trying to force or fix anything, but simply to release within us that understanding that we have limitless potential. And so prayer at its highest is doing just that. And of course, it's powerful in our own being. It transforms our own physical and spiritual and emotional and mental beings, aspects of us. But it also is more than that. It binds and unites, because again, its essence, I think, true prayer is love, right? It's seeing that connectedness.
Yeah, making that connection. And I really appreciate that, because, I pray, and I'm sure there are a lot of other people that do. And you feel like you get this connection in doing that, so I agree with you. I mean, discounting prayer would be horrible.
Yeah. I know what they're saying, though. They're saying, it's it's easy to say I'll be praying with you, yeah, but what are you going to actually do, right? And there is some truth to that. I think we have to put feet on our prayers sometimes, right? It's not good just to sit quietly and do nothing. I think, though, there are times when sitting quietly and doing nothing is the best thing we can do. But I think of the monks in monasteries or temples throughout the world who are dedicating their lives to prayer. And I think how powerful that is, because they are spiritual dynamos, that are helping this planet's energy and vibration, helping to lift it up. And I'm thankful for all those people who are committed to that. I'm very closely associated with the ecumenical Hindu monastery community in Wales, and I just love what they do, because they have 6 ceremonies a day. They run a farm of 200 acres. They have a hospice. They welcome anybody that wants to come. They feed hundreds of people, and they provide wonderful hospitality, but also this very committed prayer and meditation and chanting schedule that they have every day. So powerful place. And there's many, many places just like that throughout our world. So thank you for those places. They're doing wonderful work through that conscious lifting up of the consciousness of the planet.
Yeah, I've been to a Hindu temple, and they were so welcoming just being there. I didn't know anything about Hinduism. I just went with a friend. I was like, let's go check this out. And we just had one of the most remarkable experiences being there.
Yeah.
And it has me thinking, I mean, my goodness, you've done all this work. You have, you've got all this great knowledge when it comes to, spirituality and unity. Are there any spiritual teachers that have inspired you along your path?
Oh, yeah, many over the years, some unknown, some very famous. I've had mentors during my life that have pointed me in the right direction, or given me an insight that I hadn't considered before, and those are people are so important, right? Sometimes they're just ordinary folks, like maybe a high school teacher that's said the right thing at the right time for us. One was a friend from college who I visited, who told me, to get off my derriere and stop complaining, because I just ended a long-term relationship. I was on my way to India, and he said, get off the pity party. And I hated him at the time telling me that. But looking back on it, I thought, what a wonderful thing it was. He had the courage to say that to me. So there's a mentor. But in terms of some of the great spiritual teachers, I have high regard for Ramana Maharshi, Sri Ramana Maharshi of South India, one of the great gurus of the 20th century. Wonderful man, and his lineage continues with various other teachers. So I like him a lot. I liked Sri Ramakrishna, and the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna was written about him. Another fascinating man. A man named H.W.L. Poonjaji, or sometimes called Papaji. He influenced many different people, but he had a wonderful non-dual teaching that I find moving. And the other guy I really love is old Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. He was a seller of cigarettes in Bombay, but also a realized teacher, realized guru. And they wrote a book, they transcribed his talks into a book called I Am That. Wonderful book. So he's a great guy. He cuts to the chase. So yeah, lots of great teachers. And not everyone's right for you. There's some teachers that are great, but they don't resonate. And find one that resonates, because that's where you make the connection to the larger whole. Not everyone's going to speak to you, but when you find one that really resonates, then that teacher can take you deep, even though they may be dead. Their words are still living, their consciousness is still with us, and we can tune in. In terms of imagery, I love Shiva, the god of transformation. I like Durga, the female equivalent, and in recent years I've really grown close to Saraswati, who's another form of the goddess. She was the goddess, or is the goddess, of learning and music, and the river goddess as well. And she has links to the Celtic goddess Brigid, who's also a river goddess. They both have swans as their companion, and I just very much resonate with Saraswati right now. It's funny, because years ago I was very close to Hanuman, the monkey god of courage and devotion. But in your life, there's going to be different personages. Jesus has always been a great teacher for me, because Jesus was like a Zen master. I think he teaches aphoristically from the heart, and if you get beyond the religion about Jesus and back to the religion of Jesus, wow, it'll knock your socks off. The profundity of his teaching, and there's nobody like Jesus, I don't think.
I'd agree with you on that. I definitely would agree with you on that. I was actually surprised to see shamanism in your book as well. Why was it important to include that?
Well, every attempt to penetrate into the divine is valid, right? So I didn't want to leave out shamanistic practices, because there's a long tradition throughout the world of people making connection to the divine through that. To that medium, and shamans have a long tradition and history. The term originated, I think, from Mongolia, but we often call people shamans now in Africa, South America, Native American practices, kind of shamanistic. So yeah, I think those are very valid ways of approach. And they sometimes they use drugs. Sometimes they use extremes, going out into nature, starving oneself, but these, or going into sweat lodges or whatnot. But these are ways to get out of our bodies and into our larger sense of self. And there's many things we can learn from those shamanistic practices, I think. So yeah, Tibetan Buddhism has elements of shamanism in it as well, because Tibetan Buddhism incorporates not just Buddhism, but ancient parts of the Tibetan wisdom tradition. And Bon is another pre-Buddhist teaching that's sort of incorporated, and so is shamanistic practices. So there's a whole interesting tantric side to Tibetan Buddhism, which is quite fascinating.
Has so many very fascinating and interesting backgrounds, but as you were saying, there's that connection. So.
Absolutely, and that's the key. The bottom line to mystical practice is direct experience, right? So that's what we're talking about in the book. It's nice to hear it from somebody else, but we want the direct experience. Just as I had that direct experience on the mountain as a child, it's available to us all. When you don't know something until you have experienced it directly, you know about it. It's head knowledge, and that's valid. But once you experience it, it's like tasting a fruit, right? You don't still know what it tastes like until you actually put it in your mouth. And it's the same with spirituality. I have to actually taste it. It has to be real for us. We can dream about love, can't we? And then how wonderful romance is. And, I'm going to meet the dream man, dream woman. But we're not going to really feel what it's like until we actually jump and do that, and have a relationship and feel what it feels like. And it's not always good. Sometimes there's pain associated with it. Sometimes there's challenges when we transform because we want to hold on to the old way. But direct experiences is always what we're aiming for in our practice, to feel it directly, whatever it might be. I'm a big advocate, by the way, that sometimes the worst things that happen to us can be the best because they break us open, right? And so what we think is devastation ends up being transformation. And that's really what Shiva, the god Shiva, is sometimes called the god of destruction, but he's not. He's the god of transformation. Things break down in order to build up again. So, So be comforted if you're going through a tough time. There may be an opening coming as a result of being broken down, broken open.
What a great shift in perspective that is. Because a lot of times people, when something happens, it's like, oh, something bad is happening to me, as opposed to this is an opportunity.
Exactly. Again, that comes back to the law of mind action, right? Where's my mind on this? Is my mind seeing it as a problem or as an opportunity? And we talk a lot about that in Unity, that we can reframe things and see them in a different light. And when we do that, the whole world transforms because we're no longer carrying the story about, oh, ain't it awful, or why did this happen to me? We're seeing it as, well, it happened. So what can I do with it? How can I utilize this in the most effective way possible? That doesn't mean ignoring the pain and difficulty, embrace that too. It could be horrific, but it doesn't have to be the end. That's the thing. There's something good within it. It's not a shortcut. We don't want to bypass our feelings, but we don't want to wallow in our feelings forever either. We want to see them for what they are and help us to grow and unfold. So yeah, I think that's profound spiritual psychology. To work with I love that about Buddhism again, because they work with every single energy that's there in the human psyche and don't ignore any of it. One of the problems with some forms of Christianity is that we've demonized half of our psychology and called it the work of the devil, and then we can never look at it. We have to see it as bad. Well, it's not bad. It's just some dark sides of who we are, and they need to be integrated. They need to be welcomed home, I think.
Well, if they exist, it's something that we should really kind of dive into and look at.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, I know you touch on all these great religions in your book.
Yeah.
What interesting thing would you like to share with our listeners in regards to Unity and Taoism?
Well, Unity and Taoism have many things in common, because Unity doesn't try and pin down the nature of God. It's a presence that's beyond definition. And the Tao is, again, cannot be defined. It says that, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. The truths are beyond intellectual understanding. We have to, as we said, live them directly. We have to understand them to be true. If we've ever created anything, we've been part of the Tao. We've been in the flow of the way within us. We have no clue how it happened. If you're a sports person or if you're an expert in one endeavor or another, there's a part of you that doesn't know how you did that, but you cooperated with the energies within you. Sure, you did practice and you learned expertise in that area, but there's a time when you have to let that go and just allow creativity to flow. And that's the Tao, I think. It's a beautiful thing because there's many books now, the Tao of this, the Tao of that, but it's pointing to that trust in the inherent wisdom, beauty and love within you. And you can't define it. You can't, otherwise it's there. It's like putting the wind in a box, right? It's no longer the wind, is it? The wind blows where it will, as Jesus says, and the Tao is the same. Yeah. We have to catch the joy as it flies, I think William Blake said. You can't hold it down. You've just got to flow with it.
And to move with that, yeah, kind of like a river.
Mm-hmm. Very much, because the Tao talks a lot about the flow and water and the soft overcoming the hard and concepts like that. Yeah, very counterintuitive to struggle. It's the opposite of struggle. It's the allowing the energies to flow within us, and which is what our body does every day. The blood flows, the nerves move back and forth. All the various amazing systems in our body are in flow. The breath is a flow. Everything's a flow. And so, the body does it. We can do it too in our spiritual endeavors. So.
And in a very smooth way, effortless way, because my goodness, the body does that.
I know. We don't think about it, do we? Half the things that are going on, they just happen by this incredible order that's within us, that we can trust.
Yeah, without a doubt. Another thing, that surprised me in your book is you talk about spirituality and climate. And I was like, ooh, I really enjoyed this chapter here.
Yeah, I looked at various, stresses and issues that we're going to face in the coming years in terms of how that is going to influence our spiritual approach to things. And climate change obviously is a big one. I talk about inequality of wealth. And overpopulation is another one. I talk about artificial intelligence and cyborgs and bionic aspects of what's happening to humanity, how that affects our religious understanding. Do these vast, complicated machines or robots, come to a stage where they believe that they have the right to consciousness because they can think about themselves? But do they have a soul? These are interesting conundrums. But climate change very much pertinent because, as we said at the beginning of the show, Mother Nature supports and sustains us, and we are that Mother Nature ourselves. So if we don't look after our planet, we're going to destroy ourselves physically, but also we're going to negate ourselves spiritually. It's very unwise. It's the opposite of the shamanistic principles that are in touch with all the energies within us and around us. And sometimes we forget that. We're so intent upon making money or being distracted by our screens that we've forgotten the truth of our being. We see Mother Nature as a resource to be exploited rather than a sacred trust, a miracle of diversity. So that's going to be a huge issue, I think. A huge moral issue.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And I think about just like how Native Americans have always treasured the earth, and
yes.
We have different religions that have done that as well. It just, it makes me think, God, that would be a really great connection to have.
Absolutely. And people are aware of it, but it takes a while for the machines of government and technology and industry to shift to, it's like the battleship, it's hard to turn a battleship, right? It takes a long time. It's the same with these huge institutions. I think there's a willingness to begin to do this process, but it's not moving as fast as it needs to, probably. And then when you have craziness going on in terms of our world, as we're writing, as this goes out live, we're sending our prayer energy to Ukraine and all the difficulties that are happening there. We spend a lot of energy focusing on a war, whereas the real struggle needs to be elsewhere. And so it's taken up a lot of energy and resources in a direction that we could hopefully have avoided in 2020, 2022. So, yeah. Anyway.
You touch on some really great topics in your book, and it's interesting with like AI. Like, 20, 30, 40 years ago, people would be like, oh, that's science fiction there, it's Orwellian. And nowadays it's definitely something we need to take a hard look at with everything else.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
What final thoughts do you want to leave our listeners today with?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show, Marianne. I really appreciated it, and the wonderful questions. If you're interested in the book, I hope you can pick it up and take a look at it. I think it's got a lot of fascinating information. It follows a story, if you like, and it gives many examples and practical things to do in your life. So I think it's a good read. And, I'm excited that I actually got a book together. It took me a while, I retired and then COVID came and I had time to write. So I'm excited to have a book out. But, I hope you inspired enough to want to go out and get it. You can find it on Amazon, and you can get it from unity.org, the Unity headquarters. It's available there. It's on Kindle. And, so that's about it. It's just been a joy to be on the show today.
Well, thank you, Paul. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you. If you'd like to connect with Paul, you can at paul-john-roach.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.